There may be another year to go before the all-new Formula 1 cars hit the track for the first time, but every team is already well advanced in work on their 2026 car designs for what some, including Red Bull team principal Christian Horner, call the biggest rules reset in F1 history. While the regulations continue to be fettled, and there are further tweaks coming, much to the frustration of those trying to design the cars, a raft of changes late last year tackled concerns about slow lap times by improving predicted performance by around 2 seconds. That's according to the estimate of FIA single-seater director Nicholas Tombazis. We won't really know how quick the 2026 cars are compared to the current ones, and they will be a little slower until they start to run on track. But the modifications made last year, first with the major changes to the regulations approved in October, the 9th version of the regs, then with a number of further tweaks in the 10th issue released in December, have increased the scope for downforce generation and fine control of the aerodynamic characteristics to allow increased opportunity for teams to add downforce. As McLaren team principal Andrea Stella puts it, the result of the changes is that the cornering speeds of the new cars now look much more convincing. The overall direction for the 2026 rules was set long ago, with the recent changes simply improving the detail of the concept. Compared to 2025, the cars will be 10cm narrower, the wheelbase 20cm shorter, and the minimum weight slashed from the current 800kg to 724kg plus the nominal weight of a set of tyres, likely to be in the 35 to 40kg range, placing the minimum weight somewhere around the 768kg mark. But the defining change is the first major overhaul of the power unit since the introduction of the 1.6 litre V6 turbo hybrid engines back in 2014. The key change is a switch to something approaching a 50-50 split of conventional power, so that produced by the internal combustion engine, and electrical power. To achieve that, the electric motor now kicks out 350 kilowatts, approximately 469 brake horsepower. That's around 3 times the current 120 kilowatts. The actual split is set to be slightly more in favour of the V6, which will likely put out more power than the MG UK as manufacturers push towards 1000 bhp and beyond with the new power units. But with the extra weight of the bigger batteries, plus the demands of harvesting sufficient energy to make the most of the electric motor to achieve the performance required, there have been major changes to the car designed to reduce drag while maintaining performance in the corners. As design legend Adrian Newey says, the chassis regs have been written to compensate for the power unit regulations. While that has made framing the regulations more difficult, it was necessary in order to retain manufacturer commitment on top of bringing in new ones such as Audi and Ford. Tombazis argues without this change there would have been only 2 engine manufacturers left, by which he means Ferrari and Mercedes. Chief among the changes made to offset the power unit impact are the low drag straight line mode that the adjustable bodywork switches to when not traction limited, so when not cornering or at any real risk of wheel spin, with the downforce cranked back on for corners. The rules for the system are still being fine-tuned, with the focus on ensuring the safe balance between front and rear aero load. The most recent car changes are more subtle ones designed to give teams more scope to tweak the airflow. But to compensate for that loss of performance potential, the top body aero, vastly simplified under the 2022 rule changes, has been made slightly less constrained. F1's regulations are written using CAD coordinates, with the shape of the car defined by a number of reference volumes in which certain bodywork may be put. Within that, there are further regulations that define what shapes can be used. This shows the key legality boxes that make up the car, with the originally published 2026 regulations on the left and the modified version of it on the right. The first key area of change is the front wing. The front wing is one of the most important aerodynamic devices on the car, not just because of its downforce generating capacity, but in how it sets up the airflow that the rest of the car uses, in particular the front of the floor. As part of the recent changes, the FIA has increased the size of the regulatory box in which the front wing may be placed. The FIA will also now allow a fence underneath each side of the front wing. This will increase the potential for downforce generation by conditioning the airflow that's fed to the front of the floor. The bodywork in front of the wheel on the outside of the end plate has also been freed up a little to create better potential for flow conditioning. Tombazis describes these changes as the most significant. While they are subtle visually, this is about ensuring teams can optimise the airflow while reducing the chance of outwash geometries that contribute to the turbulent air that makes cars following each other closely difficult. Alpine has already given us a sneak preview of the kind of geometries this allows. Remember the pre-2022 cars that featured endless little aero contraptions designed to condition the airflow with great precision? The astonishingly complex bargeboard designs exemplified this. While it's an exaggeration to say such designs will be back, the recent rule modifications have given far more scope for teams to manipulate the airflow at the front of the floor and around the side pods through the expansion of the boxes where bodywork may appear. Part of the motivation for this is to improve the weight control to ensure turbulence doesn't become worse than expected. Tombazis argues that the research numbers of the FIA are better than anything it has seen before. Under the current regulations, we've become very familiar with the 4 vanes that are permitted on each side of the car at the front of the floor. Those remain and are vital in ensuring the optimum airflow into the floor and around the side pods, but there's far more to it than that. And with greater freedom around the side pods, there's now the chance for teams to use more flow conditioning devices. This potentially could make it easier to achieve a good through corner balance, which has been a big challenge under the current rules. One of the changes that won't be immediately obvious to the eye is the increase in the size of the diffuser. This will aid the downforce generation significantly and, according to the FIA, means that a reduction in downforce of around 40% compared to the current cars will be reduced to approximately 15%. This is despite one of the key objectives with the new cars being to ease the dependence on the underfloor to create downforce. While the Venturi tunnels that compress then expand the airflow to accelerate it, creating the low pressure area that's key to prodigious downforce, are still there, and ground effect will continue to be crucial, Tombazis describes the 2026 cars as less reliant on the Venturi tunnels for creating aerodynamic load. The reasoning for that is that while the current cars run ultra low and very stiff to maximise the downforce at the risk of triggering the porpoising problems that all teams have encountered, the desire is for the new ones not to. Another important focus of the regs is policing the airflow weight characteristics to ensure the cars can follow closely. As Tombazis said, tricks were missed with the current regs to prevent this. There's still some changes teams are waiting on related to the rear of the car, notably the aero around the rear wings and diffuser edges. That's all part of the process of constant evolution that's applied to the rules, even before the cars run for the first time. What we've explained here is all relatively minor details, but they are significant ones that will increase not only the performance of the cars, but also the scope for visual differences. Williams team principal James Vowles describes the increased freedom this provides as allowing greater differentiation between teams. There are still big question marks over the performance level of the 2026 cars, not just in terms of lap time, but also the need to optimise the running of the car around charging the battery. However, the lap time deficit of the 2026 cars compared to the current machines will vary by track configuration. At slower tracks with plenty of opportunity for harvesting energy, say Monaco, it will be smaller, but fast circuits such as Monza will inevitably have a bigger drop-off owing to the demands of the beefed-up hybrid and the amount of full throttle time. Based on the paddock talk about car characteristics in the simulators, even on qualifying laps there will be the need to harvest energy, whereas today the recharge is turned off ahead of the lap to allow maximum performance. Even with optimisation of management of the electrical power, that's set to be a problem that endures. But the progress made with these recent changes at least means that the pace of the cars should be roughly where F1 expects it to be. The big question now is whether or not the FIA's vision for the cars, revealed in the various images it has released, is delivered on. As the current rules have shown, when you take a set of regs written by a small group of people and send them out into the world with thousands of designers and engineers optimising the designs, there will be some unintended consequences. That applies both to the chassis and the power unit side. And it's worth noting the FIA has formulated these regulations purely using CFD research and without wind tunnel testing, a decision made for cost reasons. But now, at least the worst concerns about the 2026 regulations have been tackled. But despite that, you can guarantee the ongoing tweaks will be a regular point of discussion and perhaps even controversy in the year to come.